Hello and welcome to Cadiz. This is Dresden's Tale, episode 31. This is a show where we follow the adventures of Dresden Fane, a dwarf, a warlock, a lover of the theater and literature. Our hero exists in the violence of the Keld culture, a land where the clan chief owns everything except your soul. Your only claim to property is your own strength, giving you the right to carry it or consume it in his name, or hers, because the ladies can be strong too. Don't delude yourselves. This is a story of darkness and shadows, but this dwarf can read in the dark. What does it take to make a book? We know the ancients wrote on stone tablets and etched things on walls. It must have been pretty hard to carry around a novel back then. Yeah, we know better. Turns out, stone carvings last a long time. Paper doesn't. Even if you can avoid fires, floods, and discourteous readers, paper doesn't do well even sitting on a bookshelf. Conditions matter, but only to a point when you're talking about thousands of years. It's a safe bet that storytelling goes back to the first time one of man's ancestors told another to, "Get off my lawn." The next day, Connie Cobblestone told her neighbor about how Dirty Butt Joe had been walking around half erect outside her cave, scaring the kids and eyeballing the garden gnomes. Her neighbor liked the story so much, the next day she told Fred that Joe had his pet Sabretooth with him, and fiction was born. Fred passed on the story, but by the time anybody could write it down, 70,000 years later, Fred was the hero of the story, and nobody remembered Dirty Butt Joe at all. If it was the Etruscans who wrote it down, it might have been transcribed onto gold leaf. In 800 BC, that's what they were doing. According to my extensive research, 5 minutes on Google, and my super accurate memory from 30-year-old classwork, one of the oldest books that we know about was theirs. Paper wouldn't come around for another 900 years or so, at least not what we'd call paper now. Even then, it took a while to get it right, and the printing press didn't come along for another 14 centuries. That's when books really became a thing. Before that, they were one-offs or copied, and they were a rarity, a real treasure to own. That's where we're at with the Kelds. They have a few dozen holy texts that were cared for in the holy city of Patronsburg. With mankind nearly destroyed, papermaking had fallen beyond the ability of civilized man. Meanwhile, the Knolls were just starting to figure it out when the Velito rebounded. It didn't take long for papermaking to be reestablished. First at a mill near Parnsilia, and soon every clan and major settlement developed some capability. With the entire culture centered on religious doctrine, there was a big emphasis put on getting copies of the holy texts into circulation. An industry wasn't born per se, but rather house executors were sent out to copy whatever they could find. Concurrently, sages struck out on a rediscovery of all that had been lost, creating a culture of research and investigation. Records were kept, economic and otherwise. Trade deals had to be documented. In 2051, most Keld warriors are literate, along with a fair number of proles. For those who want them, books are available for loan. And for those who don't, you better be careful, or you might find yourself tasked with making a few copies for the boss. That's your history lesson for the day. I am, and will forever be, your guide, Lewis Nichols, and this is Chapter 29 of Dresden's Tale, Volume 2. It's the 25th day of Ortwin, 2,051 years after the fall, and we find Dresden peaceful and alone with a book in his hand. Pines grew thick near the shore, busting right up out of the stone and seemingly unaffected by the salt water. A man could get lost in the deep shadows created by their low branches. Dresden came hoping for exactly that. It was usually quiet on the wooded, rocky coast. A bitter, wind-driven mist was usually enough to keep people away. On cloudy days, like this one, it was dark enough in the tangle for his heat-sensitive vision to come into play. His injury affected even that, but only when looking off into the distance. Close up, the words stood in sharp contrast to the rest of the page. He had no desire to live in a cave, but maybe that's why some dwarves did. He could see better without light than most species could see with it. It was just a few days to the end of the year holidays, and things were getting chaotic around the docks. 6 high holy days in 2 weeks, along with an unhealthy dose of lesser celebrations mixed in between. Every clan had their own holidays, and they were all observed here. Ships had been arriving with food and celebrants almost nonstop, but it was a light day. He'd heard there were storms out at sea, but he was thankful for the rest. Haspern must have been feeling the load too, and just gave everybody the day off to recoup. Seemed like a good idea to seek out a quiet spot and do some reading. "This is the plain of Auckland?" an olive-skinned human asked. The man's eyes were thin, but not like he was from Odessa. Dresden didn't know where he was from or how he'd been spotted. Just another annoying convert with a chance to learn a better way of life. Dresden scowled at the middle-aged man. "Are you asking me? I came here for a bit of peace, not to be bothered with ignorant questions." Adding to his frustration, focusing outside his reading nook had caused his vision to revert. For a moment, he was effectively blind. Sorry, I saw you were reading. Was hoping an educated man could help me." Dresden grumbled. "Must we be responsible for all these idiots?" "It's time's endless reflection." He held up his book. Notes about it anyway. The actual tome is hundreds of pages. Got it from the Temple of Balis, even though it's a holy book of Yalnia. I guess that's all foreign to you. I'm okay with temples and churches. I've learned a great deal about Nev from a priest of Jessa. It's good there are no tensions between the aspects. I mean, not much anyway. It's geography I don't understand. We left Laredo and came to Odessa. We left there, and someone said we had come to Auckland, the city of Parnsilia. Do you know of it? Dresden closed his book. The man was hopeless. This is the plain of Moldav. Laredo, Odessa, the Blazes, Moldav, Julbex, Manelia, they're all plains. There are a lot more, too. Auckland is a part of Moldav. It's a region. Arista is next to it. You probably passed by Marvin's Point to get here. That's a city in Arista. Way south is the Foot. It's warmer there. Those three together are what people call the East. That's where the Stone Clan, the Doomed, and the Maraudons are from. The West is mostly Kraus and Oster, with the Black Flags and Legend clans. Then the North is the Campbell clan in the region of Tarikia. Cadiz is right in the middle of it all. That's where you are now. There's more to it than that, but I don't even expect you to remember what I've told you. The man smiled and jinted noddly. It helps. My name is Kev. I will try to remember. Should I service you now, sir? What? Should I service you now? You're a warrior, and you did help me. I don't have anything to gift in return, except for myself. Service? No, you don't need to service me, Kev. What was wrong with people, Dresden thought. Species mixing, genders not mixing, whole piles of people twisted up and mixed up shit, is what his papa would say. In part, he knew he was the weird one. Men and women made families, but that had nothing to do with taking pleasure. Gender wasn't much of a barrier for most of his fellow clansmen. The amount of hair didn't matter, or even the number of legs. What are they teaching the converts? For that matter, what are they doing to them? He looked up and back to where the man was sitting, but he'd left. Not my problem anyway. Turning back to the book, he realized he'd lost his place. Figures. He couldn't get glyphs and packing crates out of his mind anyway. Life had become a numbing routine for the warlock. First, every morning he was expected to report to the Temple of Balis whether he was training that day or not. If anyone in the city needed to go to one of the outlying farms or just send a package there, it was his job to pocket space them. If it was a training day, he stayed, 6 days at a time, 40 feet up in a tree, eyes straining under the efforts of studying manuscripts written on the Mojdakal glyph and the art of Ziblich in general. Then it was 2 days loading and unloading ships. Crate by crate, bundle by bundle, and boat by boat. It was back-breaking labor. After that, right back to the books as the cycle began anew. His instructor was supposed to be there to teach, but apparently believed in self-discovery. She occasionally shared her thoughts on certain concepts, but Dresden wasn't sure her deep insights applied very well to real-world applications. His swimming instructor had been fun, the first Minotaur he'd ever met who could do more than tread water. After that, a rather contemplative elf had spent a week teaching a class methods to help students better tolerate heat and cold. Dresden was ready to get back into the field, but winter was for training. It was the Keld way, so he did not complain. His mind wouldn't settle. Dresden gave up and went looking for his friends. No, she hasn't asked about you, Garum told him. He'd seen Lee the time or two in the early weeks of Ortwin, but she'd turned cold. Not that it mattered. She was a running in, and he was a dwarf. She was a veteran, and he was a wannabe, stuck as a dock worker. She was pretty, though, no matter her species, and for just a moment, over a month ago, she had seemed interested. Just asking, he said. Maybe when the spring came, he'd be recalled home where he could visit Bee, rather than just sending her letters. Maybe if you didn't start tongue-fucking another girl in front of her, she'd be a little friendlier, Nancy cackled. What do you know? Dresden fussed. Wait, what do you know? She doesn't know anything, Dresden, Garum told him as he handed off a big glass bottle of something alcoholic. My sister is not interested in you, so for the 100th time, get over it. Ha ha, lizard nuts. I'm not saying she does or if she doesn't, but I know 2 things. First off, if you can get one to take a bath, dwarves are a damn nice fuck. Your sister wouldn't be the first girl to go for a ride on the dirt pole. Nancy smiled wide at Dresden, broken teeth and all. Second, women are interested in a man until they give him a reason not to be. In your case, Garum, it's until you show him that lopsided face of yours. Her cackling laughter was a little disturbing. What the fuck is a dirt pole? Dresden whispered. I think she means your dick, and my sister's not interested in riding it. Garum kept his voice equally low. The friends caroused and teased. It was a beautiful winter's day, with only a light breeze blowing in from the sea. Inland, just a few hundred yards, it was probably more comfortable, but on the docks, Dresden's fingers ached. At least it was something to keep him company in his embarrassment and his frustration. He had just wanted to know how Lee had been the last few weeks, not whether she wanted to bet him. Sex was all any of these fools ever thought of. Dresden thought it was because of the governor. Great hero or not, he was a man of loose morals. His pawpaw didn't even believe the unaging Monkey knew a respectable trade. Though Dresden doubted that. You couldn't get where he was in the clan and be a blasphemer. Because so many warriors from other clans lived in Georgetown, it seemed a very mannered place once you got off the docks. It made the Laredo man's advances all the stranger. It was something one might expect in Orlok's Cove on Odessa. In Georgetown, such things were kept quiet, if they happened at all. He had heard that a certain building, on certain nights, boasted wild orgies. Monkey and Minotaur wreathing in such passion you couldn't tell where one started and the next ended. The dwarf shuddered. That was way too much fur for him to think about. Wall-to-wall carpet munching. He smiled at his own private joke. Leith, on the other hand, was nothing but soft, caressable skin from head to toe. He chastised himself for paying Demi any attention at all. So do you believe the things Dresden tells himself? Or is it just little lies to make him feel better? Let me know what you think in the comments. And that's not just going to do it for this episode. That's going to do it for 2051. That's what this story is about, after all. The passage of time and what happens to Dresden and the land he lives in as it does. We're just sharing a long, steady stroll with our hero as he discovers himself and the world around him. Thank you so much for joining me in this journey. I'm glad you could hang out with me for a few minutes today. Don't forget to do the stuff. Like, comment, and share. It sure does help. And don't forget to check out my selections for Kindle on Amazon. But most of all, thank you for listening. And I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful day.